Welcome once again to our continuing YouTube video series on investment and financial opportunities in the post-pandemic era of the COVID-19 coronavirus. My name is Christopher Neufeld of Neufeld Legal, and in this particular video we're going to be discussing the potential opportunities available in the pharmaceutical realm, specifically generic pharmaceuticals. Now, as one might be aware, there has been an increasing push to increase production of pharmaceuticals, and we would expect generic pharmaceuticals in the country that's acquiring them. So, whereas a lot of the pharmaceuticals have been manufactured, whether in China, India, or somewhere else in Asia, there's a push for pharmaceuticals being produced in North America. And what does this mean from the perspective of an investment and financial perspective? Well, it means that parties have to look at the pharmaceutical companies that have a strong presence in the North American market and see how the developments with respect to the government are going with respect to potential funding of those businesses, whether to insource their foreign operations back to the U.S. or alternatively increasing their operations in the United States and Canada, given the fact that there is that pressure to domesticate the production of pharmaceuticals and other drugs and health matters, which there has been a general feeling that these aspects have been outsourced too greatly, and the outsourcing has been coming at a detriment to the native economies and the native people. The challenge with this whole aspect is that there is the continual demand for cheaper and more affordable healthcare. And a large part of that healthcare push has been to reduce the costs, which in part is made possible to keep down through the globalization and expansion of the pharmaceutical and drug industry, such that it went to countries where there is a much lower labor force and sourcing it out. So what we could well be seeing is a acceptance by the governments, at least in the short term, of the need to keep at least the generic side of the pharmaceuticals at a pretty good price on the interest of manufacturing in their own native countries. This is a serious consideration that should be looked at, and looking at the direction of these pharmaceutical companies. So we've got a number of global pharmaceutical companies, and what you find is you want to focus on those who seem to be shifting a larger business segment back to the North American market, because the embodiment of the United States and Canada is such that there is not as great a concern as compared to elsewhere. Even with respect to Europe. Europe is considered still a bit distinct. Canada is considered more in line with the United States with respect to the manufacture of pharmaceuticals. And the idea being that it's not Asia. Asia is apparently the concern, at least on the political angle, as to an excessive amount of manufacturing being undertaken in another continent where they can assert predominance and control, and in turn have a significant impact on the employment cycles, the production systems, and it in turn is cutting down on the opportunities for North Americans, primarily Americans, but nevertheless North Americans, to be engaged in meaningful employment. Because with so much automation, there are areas that need to be resumed as employment centers. And as has been shown, pharmaceuticals, especially generic pharmaceuticals, have been flowing too much offshore. Now they want to be brought more inbound. So some of the companies that should be looked at, and we are recommending none of these companies, but these are areas that you can look at to get a sense of where developments are going, who the leaders are, what their focus are. We've got Teva Pharmaceutical Industries, which is one of the larger leaders in the sense of pharmaceuticals. We also have Mylan. Teva, before we go on, is based out of Israel, but they are global in their nature. Israel being one of the countries that the United States is particularly fond of. Mylan, which is a heavily United States and Canadian operation, also a very good position. Actavis is actually based out of New Jersey. Been around for nearly 15 years. Previous iterations involved in that company. Sandoz International. This is a German pharmaceutical company, operations all over the world. If anything, we'll probably might see Sandoz make some maneuvers to America centralize, address that presence that they're looking for with greater manufacturing, not simply distribution. Then we have a company like Sun Pharma, which is one of the larger Indian generic and pharmaceutical companies. This is one of those companies that will need to try to find a way to provide greater positioning in the United States, because otherwise they're going to be sort of pushed aside to some degree due to what we see as a possible political move to insource, and this is too much of an outsourcing area. Pharmaceutical companies, this one also is heavily U.S. based. Endo Pharmaceuticals, this is a Pennsylvania-based company, around 100 years, heavily in the pharmaceuticals and as well as generics. Same as Lupin. Lupin is a much more recent company. It is based in Maryland, but then here too they have substantial plants in both India and Thailand. With that being said, there needs to be a push on it to shift manufacturing over to the United States if it's going to continue to be able to meet these political headwinds. Dr. Reddy's Laboratories, I believe that's another Indian-based pharmaceutical company. They will need to make some maneuvers to make themselves more hospitable to the United States, given their substantial presence over in India, and that is not necessarily going to go over well with the political climate, at least if it continues to lean right and take on that position. And then we have Hospital, which is also another pharmaceutical producer, and they are headquartered in Illinois, now recently acquired by Pfizer. There again, the scope of their manufacturing is going to have to be good, but it's still going to have to be pushed even further into the United States. A lot of this is for appearance sakes. A lot of it is for just trying to deal with the whole perceptions of so much outflow, the need to restore employment, to regain employment. That's another major aspect. It's not just because of the coronavirus, but there's an aspect of regaining employment which is going to have to take place. And there needs to be that maneuvering. And it'll be a lot of investigative work, seeing what is happening with on both the Congressional Hill and within the White House with respect to how they're positioning stuff to try to facilitate these end goals that they're looking at, what kind of subsidization they might be doing, where these companies are looking to invest, and where there might be opportunities. There are going to definitely be opportunities here. The question is where they're going to come about. So one of the main, most common opportunities is from investments on stock exchanges. There will also be other opportunities with respect to individuals looking to build into the pharmaceutical side. With the smaller up-and-coming pharmaceutical companies, offshoots, there are just going to be opportunities there, just given the direction that the governments are shifting to return to their native shores this manufacturing, which has for too long a time been sitting in Asia, and that is not politically expedient anymore. So an opportunity does exist, a matter of looking at where those opportunities lie, and the opportunities can be optimized. How great the opportunity is, we don't really know right now. There could be short-term impacts on this if the legislation does not go the right way, if demands on the healthcare industry go in a different direction. Nevertheless, there could also be very significant impacts as the concerns over pharmaceuticals, especially generic pharmaceuticals, are allowed to have increased prices, and the profit margins are actually significantly increased by the reality that the return of manufacturing to North American shores is not as costly as the increased pricing that's permissible, given the fact that these operations are allowed to increase and expand within the native countries. So something to look at and consider, because there is potential there. It's just a matter of where the potential is going to be best be found and where it will flow. So I hope you have found this investment and financial opportunity perspective informative and are able to see where there is potential in this post-pandemic era that we are now moving through. Thank you.